So the main stuff we're going to talk about today is DevSecOps and shifting security left, how to build your development muscles, getting good at writing software design docs, and then making engineering and security partnerships repeatable. I think at this point, most attendees are bought into the idea of working with and enabling developers and moving beyond the department of no. We saw this work really well with DevOps because this led to software teams being able to ship products faster and safer, and it also led to software engineers learning more about infrastructure, as well as infrastructure folks becoming more like software engineers through things like infrastructure as code, and moving away from just a bunch of like random scripts and actually codifying things and having it be version controlled and being able to track who's making changes. DevSecOps is really a similar idea. Let's continue to ship software quickly, but let's also do it securely. I think DevSecOps is great for security because it lowers the barrier to shipping new software. A lot of security teams, historically have thought that that's counterintuitive because there's less checks. It's, you don't have time to review everything. But to me, the faster you can ship software, the faster you can fix things. There's always going to be vulnerabilities in software, and if you lower the barrier to fixing P3s, P4s, P2s, the more likely somebody is going to do them because people like it when things are easy. As part of shifting left, security has really jumped on the opportunity to have devs sharing in the security burden. We know that developers are always going to outnumber security folks, and security can't be a technological expert on everything that your company uses. Shifting left also means that security is just a component of good software. And devs want to build good software. They want it to be scalable, they want it to have a good user interface, they want it to be reliable. Having software be secure is just another foundational component of building a good piece of software. But to do that, devs need to be security minded, and it's security's job to help them. These people may not have had a lot of experience in the security space, and your team should be enabling these people to make good security decisions without you. That should be the goal. I think a natural intersection of security and engineering is actually security features. Security features allow you to better serve your customer and unlocks additional revenue, especially in the B2B space. And I think these two bullet points are something that are really a priority for every business. Your business exists to serve its customers. Your business also probably wants to make money. Historically, security has been seen as the cost center, but luckily customers care more about security than they have ever before, and so you can start to change that by getting involved in this type of work. This is also a really good opportunity to transfer knowledge between these two teams, which is really a core concept in my mind for DevSecOps. Everybody needs to be learning from each other. DevSecOps is not just about software engineers fixing vulnerabilities, it's also about security engineers learning from software engineers. I'm not saying that everybody needs to be a senior full stack engineer to be a security engineer, but being able to write software will help you solve problems and make you more relatable to your partners in the engineering organization. You're going to be more confident doing design reviews, you'll write up better vulnerability tickets, you might be able to even look through the code base and figure out exactly where that problem is introduced. And when you write up better tickets, they're more likely to get fixed because it's less work for the other person who's supposed to be fixing them. This also gives you an opportunity to be part of the business's overall success. Two tenets of our security team is that you should be part of the overall business's success and that you should partner really closely with engineering. The importance of being part of the business's success is obvious. Without Segment, there is no security team. Your business doesn't exist to be secure, it exists to serve your customers. Part of that might be delivering a secure product, but you should really be part of the business's overall success. This also translates to making practical security decisions for employees, helping sales and marketing, and always keeping the customer in mind. Working closely with engineering is important because the cumulative number of choices, decisions, lines of code written, bugs avoided by engineering is higher than the security team. Working collaboratively with engineering allows us to learn from each other and help everyone be a better security champion. We believe that making good software requires making good security choices, and our team is here to help engineers do that. If you haven't written any code before, that's okay. I'm not going to talk about how to get started coding in this presentation. There's people that are significantly more qualified than I am to get you going in that area. but assuming you've got some basic development skills, a great place to start is fixing some small bugs. For context, before Segment, I had written a decent amount of code, but I had never written anything that was customer-facing. If the tools I wrote for work broke, I could typically fix them on my own schedule. If you're looking for a place to get started, take a look at your vulnerability backlog. Try to find a couple lower priority issues that seem like they would be easy to fix. And if you're not sure which are going to be easy to fix, pick a couple, try to do your research, and then engage with somebody at your company who's a lot more experienced than you are. If you're having trouble finding somebody to help you out, learn about other teams by reading through their documentation, attend some engineering onboarding sessions, go to all hands, attend quarterly planning. Generally, people are interested in talking about what they're working on. If you spend some time learning about what they're doing, you can ask them some insightful questions. That's a great way to meet people at work. If your company has a buddy system or the Slack app Donut, that's a great way to meet people too. Donut will just randomly pair you with people in a similar channel. And this is a good way to meet people that aren't on your immediate team. As a security engineer, you also might be doing some things like threat modeling sessions, engineering training, design reviews. All of these are a way to meet people. If you've been a security engineer at your company for a while and you don't have friends in engineering, you might want to rethink your approach to some of your existing interactions. So you found a bug, you decided this is the one you're going to fix. Spend some time researching it. The goal shouldn't just be to fix this as quickly as possible and be like, okay, I fixed one thing, I'm an expert. Take some time to figure out where is this thing used, how well tested is it. That's a really important one because if you make a mistake and the component is really well tested, the test will probably catch your mistake. But if this is something that just doesn't have any tests and you kind of don't know what you're doing, you're a lot more likely to break things. Once you have a good understanding of how this works, go back to the person who said, hey, this is a kind of an easy thing to fix, and confirm your understanding. This will help you avoid breaking things. If you do break things, that's okay. I once made a mistake deploying code to 2 services, which made customers not be able to log in for 20 minutes with new sessions. So it happens. Everyone's going to break something eventually. The important thing is to learn from it, help your team learn from it, and then use this as an opportunity to improve your processes, documentation, and tooling. Fixing small bugs is a great way to learn how your organization ships, tests, and deploys software. All of these things are kind of the same regardless of how big the change is. You're still going to go through the same deployment process. You're still going to have to go through the same testing process. Obviously, the scale increases, but it's a good way to learn how your org does these things. And you'll quickly learn that removing a vulnerability from your code base is much more than just fixing the code. You need to spend time understanding the various places the code is used, testing it, writing new tests, responding to PR comments, getting approvals, and then actually deploying the software. This will really help you build empathy with developers. You've probably thought like, oh, that just seems like such a quick fix. Like, why doesn't somebody fix that? After you fix a couple vulnerabilities, you'll realize that it's never just a quick fix. It's always more time than you think. And you probably will have a little bit more empathy when you're talking to developers next time, if they say they haven't had time to fix something. Even at an organization like Segment, where unit tests and I guess just all tests pass within a couple of minutes and the deploy is automatic, it still takes time to do all the other stuff. For example, most of our repos CI can pass and deploy within like probably 6 to 8 minutes, and it still takes a long time just to make sure that you're confident in your changes. This is going to make you more relatable to engineers. The next time you're talking with them about a vulnerability, you're going to know a lot more about what they go through and what it takes to actually fix something. Here are some PR tips. If you haven't written a lot of pull requests before, think of your pull request as a historical document. Future engineers, including yourself, are going to look back at this. Looking at the code's one thing, looking at the Git blame's one thing, but going back and actually looking at the PR's context to figure out why the code you're looking at is actually super underrated and something I think a lot of people don't necessarily think to do. Keep your PRs short. This might mean that you have to do multiple PRs to accomplish what you're trying to do, but you should be optimizing the PR for the reviewer, not for yourself. If a PR is easy to review, it's more likely that somebody's going to catch a mistake, It's more likely that they are going to give you some insightful feedback. If a PR just becomes overwhelmingly long, it's a lot harder to find people that want to take the time to review it, and it's also going to make it worse if you need to revert something, and it's going to make it more likely for you to run into merge conflicts. If you have a brief summary and a thorough description, make sure that you're including the why. The why is really important. If there's JIRA tickets or other PRs, try to have all the information that somebody could need and pretend that they're looking at it 3 months in the future, because they actually might be. Spend a lot of time writing good tests. Writing good tests is a really good way to show engineers that you know what you're doing and that you've thought of corner cases. Detail your manual testing process. It's great to have tests that are automatic, but it's also good to show them, like, hey, here are all the different flows that I tried in the app to try to break this. This is why I'm confident that this software is going to work. And if you have screenshots or GIFs, that makes your PR even easier to understand. People can see the delta between what you're trying to do and what was there previously. And then before you merge, make sure you know how to revert. It's much better to figure out how to revert something before you need to do it than when you actually need to do it and you're freaking out because you just broke something in production. So yeah, fixing small bugs. This is a great way to make friends in engineering. Generally, people are happy to have you helping them fix stuff that was on their backlog. This is an opportunity for you to teach them about security and them to teach you about something about software engineering. If you learn something, try to share it with the rest of your team. This person is helping you. You can help them by not having somebody on your team ask them the same question. Not everything needs to go into a wiki. Like some stuff you just put in your team Slack channel, and maybe half the people forget it, but the other half remember it. So your next quest is to contribute to a new feature. And you might be thinking, why does this matter? Why should we be writing these features? For better or worse, customer sentiment about your product security is largely shaped by breaches and the security features that they interact with. At the end of the day, this is probably a reasonable proxy, since it's unlikely that a company that has an underfunded security department is going to invest a ton of money into well-built security features. Some folks on your customers' vendor security teams might review compliance certifications, but unfortunately, a lot of the other hard work that goes into a security program isn't going to get appreciated by customers, other than the fact that it helps prevent security breaches, which is huge, but it's not something that customers are actively thinking about. Usually customers aren't thinking like, wow, I'm so glad this vendor didn't get breached today. Luckily for security teams, security is becoming a bigger part of the vendor review process every year, which means that it should be easier to get your team funded to work on cool stuff. Here are some highlights from some of the stuff we've built at Segment in partnership with engineering. We built a password strength meter that's powered by the Dropbox ZXCVBN password library and Troy Hunt's Have I Been Pwned API. These allow you to align with NIST's password guidance, because it allows you to do realistic password strength checks, and it also checks for passwords that have been part of other breaches. We also built MFA. This was actually one of our early security and engineering partnerships, and we learned a lot about the process. I was in no way excluded from the team I was partnering with. I just don't think I made enough of an effort to actually make myself a part of that team. And so this project felt a lot more like a relay race, where I did the back end and then somebody else did the front end, and we kind of just made it all work. And ultimately it was a very successful project in terms of the deliverable, but we learned a lot about how to make these partnerships better in the future, which I'll get into in a little bit. We also have rebuilt our authentication and authorization services, as well as built SCIM. SCIM is really cool. SCIM allows your identity provider like Azure Active Directory or OneLogin or Okta to provision and deprovision users, map groups. If you have a B2B app and you don't offer SCIM, you should really look into this. I think the job of IT and enterprise security folks would be a lot easier if everything supported SCIM. If you're not sold on writing a whole feature, what about a secure library? Are there any vulnerability types that keep popping up in your pen test or bug bounty program? A great way to eradicate those is to make changes to the tools that your engineering team are already using and make things easier and more secure. If this is the category that you find yourself in, I still think most of this presentation will apply to you, even though its focus is actually on security features. A quick example from Segment is we had gotten a couple bug bounty reports about user-supplied JavaScript hrefs. There's a couple places in our app where it does make sense to allow users to create links, and we didn't want to deal with this anymore, and so we partnered with our engineering team to create an allow list of URL schemes. So it's HTTP, HTTPS, mail to tell. I think there might be a couple others, but JavaScript is definitely not one of them. We also added the proper refer tags automatically to links. And this is something that every link automatically gets if you're using UI Box. This is open source if you want to go take a look at what we did. Totally cool. Of course, there's a way to ignore this. If there is, for some reason, you want to be unsafe, there's a way to override it, but the default is we make a good choice for you, and almost nobody, I mean, I don't know how other companies are using this, but I can't imagine there's very many that are overriding the defaults. If you're feeling a little bit nervous, a couple things to keep in mind. You actually have a lot of value, even if you haven't written any of these types of features before, because you've probably used them as the person who turns on 2FA in every app, and you have some good ideas in your head about what is really well written and what's really annoying to use. And so you can be that initial customer research for your product and engineering teams. They're going to learn a lot from you about what you think about as a consumer of these types of features, and you're going to be able to influence the design. How many times have you set up 2FA? Probably a lot more than the average product person. So okay, so you're sold. You're not nervous anymore. You're ready to start writing some features, but you think your boss might be a holdout. Here's a couple tips to convince your boss that this is a good idea. You're going to be getting hands-on experience working in the code base you're supposed to be protecting. If you're an AppSec person and you are actually capable of fixing things and maybe even building some small things, it's going to make it a lot easier for you to find issues and help engineers avoid issues in the future. It's also going to make you better at writing tickets, as well as improve the security for your customers and unlock revenue from security-conscious customers. These are all things that should be important to a security team. It's also a good way to make friends. If you partner with an engineer on something, you're going to become their go-to person on the security team. The next time they have a question, they're not going to be like, I don't know who to ask. I'm just, not going to do this. They'll just shoot you a Slack message, and even if you're not the right person to answer it, they feel like they have a friend in the security org. All right, so let's talk about how to make your project successful. As you might expect, it actually starts in the planning phase, way before you've written any code. The easiest way, in my experience, is to build something that customers have asked for. So go through those vendor security questionnaires that you love filling out and figure out what customers are asking about. Or if your product team has a good way to track customer requests, that's another great place to look for it. And then if possible, you should always jump on the moving train. And what I mean by that is have an awareness of what your company is building. And if there's something in an area that they're already working on, try to sneak some security features into that existing work. It's a lot easier to get a team to build like one small extra thing that they're already working on than going to a service that nobody is committed to in 9 months or 2 years or whatever and being like, hey, I want to make a bunch of changes, and everybody who's written that service doesn't work at your company anymore. Once you find a team that's willing to partner with you, get them to commit to a shared goal. If your company does OKRs, this could be an OKR. If your company does something else, it's something else. But for this first feature, you should really optimize for a win, even if it isn't the most important feature to build at that time. If work is already happening, that's a great place to start. Once both teams are committed to this goal, agree on long-term ownership. If it's you working with a couple of engineers on something that they already own, it probably makes sense for them to own this long-term. Having one security person supporting a feature isn't sustainable. You want to be able to take vacations. You have other things going on. That doesn't mean like abandon them. Like hang out in the Slack channels, help them if stuff comes up. Be willing to contribute, but figure out what is a sustainable model for ownership before you go down the building route. When you're trying to get your proposal funded, start with existing data or start tracking data to show the value of this work. Maybe you're proposing building single sign-on. Look through those security questionnaires and figure out what the total contract value is. Maybe only 5 customers have asked for single sign-on, but they represent $5 million of business. Generally, your engineering org is very happy to build things for customers that are paying you millions of dollars. Maybe you're working on 2FA. Work with product to figure out what are some reasonable success metrics. What percentage of users do you expect to activate in the first month or year? Talk to friends at other companies. I think the security industry can be kind of guarded, but generally if you can talk to your peers at another company, I've found people to actually be super open about their stats and like what their current numbers are for things. So I would say just reach out to people and see if they'll share some information. Security metrics, I think, can be pretty hard. I think it's something that a lot of security teams struggle with, but luckily they're a little bit easier in product land, and your company is probably already reasonably good at coming up with product metrics. If you're somebody who's into metrics, I can recommend a talk tomorrow. A couple of my coworkers are giving a presentation, so if you want to learn more about InfoSec metrics that your boss will love, check out their talk. When you're creating metrics or even just writing software, SQL is super underrated. SQL is kind of weird because a lot of times I struggle to do something that I know how to do very easily in TypeScript, but it's really, really valuable to writing efficient software, and it also helps making supporting arguments a lot easier. If your company has a BI tool or a business intelligence tool like Looker or Mode or Snowsight, get access to it and start playing around with it. If your company has an analytics team, that's even better. They can probably run circles around you in SQL, and they have a lot of knowledge, and they are generally very happy to help you figure out how to harness the data that they've spent time cultivating. Being able to quickly query for things like percentage of workspaces with forced MFA is super valuable. You can also use these tools to create time series data, and this type of thing is great for end of quarter grades, blogs, and conference presentations. You might be wondering what happened here. Why is there this huge spike? I know I didn't include the y-axis numbers, but this hasn't been like skewed in any way. But this was the result of a project by our intern. Our intern for summer built a modal that periodically would just nudge workspace owners and say, hey, do you want to turn on forced MFA for your workspace? And over the course of about a month, we had a skyrocketing number of active workspaces with forced MFA. So this is really the power of building these types of features, is it can really help you get good activation for stuff that might already exist. We had MFA in our platform for a few years, and we've had a huge increase in users as a result of this. So once you've built your feature, revisit your original proposal. Were the original metrics you established useful? Maybe not. That doesn't mean you should keep doubling down on these bad metrics choices, but it does mean you should try to figure out like what makes a good metric for next time. How many customers are using this? What's the cumulative value of those customers? These types of things make it easy for people outside of security or even outside of engineering to understand why we're devoting engineering and security resources to building these things. If customers ask for this, do you have a way to notify those customers? Are go-to-market teams aware of what you just built? Maybe they've been dancing around the fact that you don't have SSO for 2 years, and if you build it and you don't tell them, they're going to keep dancing around a question that is now actually going to make it easier for them to sell. So, writing software design docs. The number one rule is follow whatever company process is already in place. If you're on the security team, do not try to reinvent your engineering design doc process, unless you're somebody who's written a ton of software in the past, I guess. I'm going to go through an example for us building SCIM, just to kind of give you a feel of what you might want to include in a design doc. But feel free to adapt this as you need. And just as a quick refresher, SCIM is awesome. It allows an identity provider to create users, remove those users, create groups, add people, remove people from those groups, And the reason why this is so powerful is because when you join a company, think back to like all the different things that you had to request. If a company is using SCIM, they just put you in a group, you get the same permissions as everyone else in that group, and you automatically get provisioned in all these SaaS apps, and then in a few years when you leave, you automatically get removed. So the first part of our design doc is the required reviewers. You need to pick people that are familiar with what you're trying to build so that you get good feedback. These people are going to make your proposal a lot stronger because they're going to poke holes in the parts that don't make sense, and they're going to offer improvements based off of their knowledge of these systems. Include reference docs. If you're building something that's based off of an RFC like SCIM, include those RFCs. I used to think my boss was a huge nerd for talking about how he read the like OAuth RFC and how useful it was, because that just sounded super boring to me. But I guess I'm the nerd now because I read the RFCs for SCIM and it was actually super helpful. The people that write these things are probably smarter than you, or they're definitely smarter than me because they come up with a lot of corner cases and things that I would have had to figure out through trial and error. And it was like, oh, I can just follow what they tell you to do, and it pretty much works. If you're building something that has like vendor documentation, that's helpful. Other references that you found useful, maybe you found some random blog on Medium or Substack that does a really good job explaining this. Put that in there and tell your coworkers, like, hey, read this if you don't know anything about this thing. If there's any internal docs, reference those as well. In the case of SCIM, we were heavily reliant on an existing API that allowed for user management and group management. And I wanted to tell people like, hey, like we're using this stuff that is already partially built. Have a glossary. Nobody wants to read your document and be lost. There's a lot of different pieces of jargon that, after you've read the RFC, you just, see IDP and that's identity provider. Not everyone is going to feel that same way. Now that you've gotten kind of all the background information, references and that kind of thing out of the way, you need a section that's talking about like the current state of the world. What are you building? Why do you need to build it? Why is now the time to build it? And this should include a lot of the stats that you collected during your research phase. Don't let those go to waste. Not everyone was, kind of part of the decision to actually build this. Now you're actually asking for help to decide how to build it. So bring some of these stats back. This can also be a little bit of a sales pitch. I think anything can be a little bit of a sales pitch, but this is a good way to get people bought into why you're building this thing. Next, create your requirements. Having stuff prioritized shows people that you kind of put on your product hat and you're trying to figure out like what things are absolutely necessary. For us, adding and removing users was incredibly important. Another really important piece was making it easy for our customers to use and sign up. The last thing I want to do is build something and then just get bombarded with customer tickets asking for me to show them how to use Okta. So we went through the onboarding process with Okta One Login in Azure, and now customers can just click a few buttons and they can get up and running with SCIM. Our second set of priorities were around groups. Just because something is in your prioritization lower, it doesn't mean that that has to be the order you build it. In the case of SCIM, it made way more sense for us to build the whole system and then onboard with Okta, rather than build our priority 1 features, onboard with Okta, build the priority 2 features, go through the onboarding process again. It would have added additional weeks to our timelines. It made way more sense just to build it and then go to Okta and be like, hey, we did everything. This is not waterfall software development. Just because you're spending a lot of time planning doesn't mean that it is inflexible. Your plans can totally change. Software development's hard. You need to be adaptable. But the goal here is to have something that's roughly going to translate into something that can track your work as you're moving forward. Whether this is Jira or GitHub issues or whatever, your work breakdown structure is something that should be like roughly translated to groups of tickets. Throw in some pictures. People love pictures. Learn how to use Lucidchart or whatever your company uses to draw stuff. This is a great way for visual learners to understand what you're doing. In our case, it was like, hey, all these user management endpoints already exist for non-SCIM use. We want to use them for SCIM. We're kind of just reusing them and then reformatting the requests to work with the protocol. These types of diagrams are also really helpful for people that want to understand what you're doing. These docs add a lot of credit, or these types of drawings add a lot of credibility to your docs. You can also talk about the technical details of the implementation. Try to be pretty detailed here. If somebody can pick something out that doesn't seem right, it can save you days or weeks later. If they're able to be like, hey, this isn't, this doesn't make sense, or this won't work. If you have any risks, let people know like what you've identified for this project and how you plan on mitigating them. This also adds a lot of credibility because people are going to see like, oh, this person seems to have thought about all these things. They've tried to come up with ways to avoid them. I think this person knows what they're doing, and hopefully you do. It's also totally fine to call stuff as out of scope. You're not going to necessarily have the ability to build everything all at once. It's fine to say, hey, we know this is important, but we don't have time for this right now. When you get to the security review, which you probably will because you're building something that's relatively high risk because it has a lot of security impact. Just because you're on the security team doesn't mean that this feature is now somehow exempt from review. Go through the security review from the standpoint of a developer. Have somebody else be the security engineer in the room. Feel free to argue with them over things, but really at the end of the day, like you are wearing a software engineering hat right now. You're not a security engineer. If this feels a little bit overwhelming, remember that the feedback makes your design better and avoids problems in the future. Anything that you can avoid during the planning phase, that's the perfect time to avoid it. You might have spent a couple hours writing up a paragraph, but that's way better than having somebody tell you in the PRs that this is not going to work. If your company has a standard template, 100% use that, and then get feedback from people that have written design docs before. I didn't go over this in the SCIM proposal, but if you have multiple options that you're considering, feel free to write up multiple options and get feedback on like what people think is the best choice. If you have ideas of pros and cons, definitely include those too. And then the last thing, you should work somewhere where your peers want you to be successful, regardless of what team they're on. We should all be trying to deliver something that's great for our customers. And if your coworkers don't want you to succeed, it is definitely an employee's market right now. Look for another job. So you've decided, okay, I've got my idea funded. I've got the planning docs. People think the idea is, good. They think the work breakdown structure is good. Let's actually join this other team temporarily and build this thing. So a couple of things that you can do to make this successful is try to act like you're just somebody who got hired at your company onto this new team. Have one-on-ones with the team's manager. Attend their weekly meetings. If they do stand-up every day or if they do demos or whatever, like you are on this team. Follow the team's adopted process for Jira, tickets, planning, etc. There's some things that I've learned from other teams at Segment that are now part of things that I do for my team. And I wouldn't have known to do them without joining these other teams and just stealing their good ideas and bringing them back to my team. This isn't just about you delivering new features. This is about you learning from people that are really talented in ways that are different from you at your organization. Also join their Slack channels, trade security and non-security tasks with another developer. Maybe have them build part of the security stuff and then you work on like the logging and the metrics and the dashboards or whatever. The idea is to get like a really good exposure to all of the things that are part of delivering software. Throughout this, you'll pick up new skills from product and engineering managers about how they run projects, as well as gain a general appreciation for how things are built at your company. These are a good way to level up, even if you want to be an individual contributor for your whole career. Knowing how people plan and deliver projects is going to make it easier to get promoted because you're going to be more autonomous when you're working on bigger things. And then if the team invites you to attend events like a cooking class or go-kart racing, try to go. This is a good way to meet people. I still got invited to events after showing up and beating everybody at go-kart, so definitely recommend doing fun stuff with your company. I'm not going to go into the process of like actually building SCIM. Think it would probably end up feeling a little bit like, hey, here's all this in-depth planning stuff, and then just like build it. It's going to be pretty specific to your company how things get built, but just to go over some things that I think are generally applicable to most companies. Keep your plan up to date. Those planning docs that you created, go back and make changes as the project advances. These are things that managers go back and look at. It's also something that people will probably send to each other as kind of informal documentation when they want to know how something's built. And so it's good to keep these up to date. If something changes, you think part 2 of the plan was going to take 2 weeks and then it takes 4, go back and try to re-estimate the project. Estimating how long things are going to take is important, whether you're a security engineer, whether you're a software engineer, kind of any role at the company. Being able to tell your boss accurately how long you think something is going to take is really important. And there is no shortcut to getting good at estimating stuff. Like, you just have to estimate stuff and be wrong a bunch of times, and like hopefully you get a little bit better as you go. Read up on your company's practices for logging, metrics, testing, etc. These are components of good software, just like security. We don't want software engineers to introduce a bunch of vulnerabilities. Software engineers don't want us to skimp out on logging and all of this stuff, and then when something breaks, it's just a nightmare to figure out, like, is this broken? How did it break? How long has it been broken? You want to build good software because you want your company to succeed. Revisit the pull request tips. I'm not going to go through that again, but yeah, those are really helpful. Additionally, you want to spend time writing really good tests and documentation. Docs are really, really handy if you're the person who's the expert on something, because the next time somebody asks you a question, you can just link them to the docs instead of trying to remember and then like repeating yourself. People also share docs, so if the support team or the customer success team is like, hey, how's this work? And you can just point them to docs. They're going to tell their friends on the team like, hey, these docs exist, and then you won't get asked stuff in the future. Focus on building stuff incrementally. You should have a working product at varying levels of maturity throughout the development. This doesn't mean that this is something that's released to customers, but it just means that you have something that's working at every stage. Once you get to the point where you're ready to roll something out, your company probably has a way to do feature flagging. You can do a staggered rollout and really monitor what's happening and figure out, is whatever I just rolled out actually working the way that I want it to. Create the dashboards for monitoring as you go. This will help test your notification infrastructure. The worst thing you can do is create a really nice dashboard and then forget to hook it up to Slack. And so you have all of this stuff that is actually trying to tell you that something is wrong, but you're not getting the message. After you've built the feature, you've shipped it, everything's great. Spend some time reflecting on what could be improved for next time. Not just from like the feature standpoint, but also just the whole process of the embed. A team has probably spent days or weeks or months working with you on this project. Help them out by spreading this knowledge to other people on your team. Can you convert what they've taught you into a mini training? Can you improve the documentations for that team? How can you show them like, hey, I actually really respect your time and I've grown a lot. I want to give back to you. Try to hang out in some of the Slack channels. We have questions channels at Segment that go-to-market teams will pop into and be like, hey, this, how does this SSO thing work? Or like MFA isn't working or whatever. Even if you're not the person who has long-term ownership of these features, if you're qualified to answer these, try to stay and help out, because it'll show the team like, hey, they didn't just build it and then bail. Use this knowledge to better estimate how long fixes will take in the future. Hopefully this has really increased your empathy for developers and you can have a new appreciation for how long it takes to actually build stuff. This will also help you make paved paths in the future. Think back to the React secure library I was talking about. Once you have a little bit of product experience, it's going to be a lot easier for you to build things like that just make it so you never have to see another stupid JavaScript href vulnerability from BugCrowd. If this team helped you build something and you're talking about it at an all hands, include that team in the intro or outro slide. The last thing you want to do is be like, I built this thing, and it's like, okay, actually 4 people built this thing. I'm just the presenter. If you're writing a blog, throw a quick thank you at the bottom. If somebody was helpful, shoot a message to their manager saying like, hey, this person was really useful. Offer to write a performance review for them. I know writing performance reviews is annoying. It takes a really long time, but it's really helpful to people's careers. And if somebody helped you build something awesome, the least you can do is take a half hour to write them a review. And on that note, I have to say thanks to everyone on the enterprise software team at Segment and anybody else that's helped me build stuff. We've been able to create some really cool stuff, and I definitely would not have been able to do without your help. And then as we wrap up, just a few closing thoughts. Shifting left, DevSecOps, whatever you want to call it, is at least as much about people as it is about technology. You need to be able to work well with people at your company to be able to build cool stuff. Security is a component of good software. Devs want to build good software. You just need to be there to help them. And part of that process is also you learning from them. It's not just you teaching them security. You need to be making yourself more relatable to them in the future. And a great way to do that is to fix some small bugs. And then once you kind of get your feet wet, you can make friends and start to work on some feature development. Working with devs is a lot easier when everybody speaks the same language. And for developers, that language is generally code. Security features are really valuable to customers, especially in the B2B space. But even in the B2C space, I think it's relevant. If you make MFA easy to use, more people will use it. I've started using WebAuthn, the Touch ID with GitHub, and it's amazing. It's so fast. You just fingerprint and you're good. I know Riot Games used to give some people exclusive skins for signing up for MFA. I think that you should figure out ways to incentivize your customers to make the right choices. And then lastly, learning how your company writes, delivers, and maintains software is just going to make you a better security engineer. Even if you don't see yourself as a software engineer long term, if you're somebody that works closely with software engineers, this is going to make you better at your job. And then lastly, thanks to all of you for attending this talk. This was actually based off of a blog that I released earlier this year. So if you want to revisit some of the concepts in blog format, I prefer that. I don't usually go back and rewatch a presentation that I saw. Most of the stuff is in the blog. And then if you do want to check out the slides, as I mentioned, they're on Sketch. We are hiring. Come talk to me or the 3 people in the front left up here, and follow me on Twitter. My DMs are open. If you have any questions, I'm always happy to chat with people. And that's it.
Is this a full-time position in that segment? Is it a security engineering, or are you doing this in addition to the other apps?
So it started as in addition to the AppSec job. When I started at Segment, the team was significantly smaller. The company was a lot smaller, and so I was kind of doing, some stuff with Bug Crowd, some stuff with SNCC, like design reviews, threat modeling. But I was also really interested in becoming a better software developer, and so I would make time at work to do all of the things that I talked about in the presentation. And then as our team grew, we just decided that it made sense to split the team into 2 teams. And so now we have another engineering manager that is focused on the type of stuff that I used to work on. And then I'm actually leading a team of people that are focused on this. So at this point, it is split out, but it was like a gradual thing that happened over the course of a couple of years.
So I wanted to know what do you do to make sure that developers are using like that open source like ID and that is like perspective of using the tools that effectively not using it, like common ways?
So that library is actually a component of our design system. And so we have an open source design system called Evergreen that you can check out. The docs are really good. It's really easy to use. A developer would have to go so far out of their way to not use Evergreen that it would just it would never be worth it. Because like writing something in our app without using Evergreen would just be like so bespoke and weird, it just like would not happen. All right, well, I'll be around if anyone wants to chat.